We ready? You ready? Good afternoon. Welcome to the Rapid City Legal and Finance Committee meeting for August 29th, 2018. I'd like to start this meeting off with a roll call and determination of quorum. Here. Great, thank you. All right, now that we have a quorum and it's been established, I would welcome a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
Great, thank you. All right, now we're going to move on to our general public comment for items 1 through 9. This is in time for any member in the audience to discuss items currently not on today's agenda. Are there any speaker request forms? Anyone in the audience? Okay, thank you. Seeing none, the general public portion is now closed, and let's move to our consent items. Today's consent items on the agenda has items 1 through 9. Let's open this up to public comment. Is there anyone wishing to speak? Oh, right here. Yep.
You can ask him to wait when we pull it.
Mr. Haig, do you want to speak now, or do when we're going to pull? Well, we're going to pull number 8. Do you want to do now, or?
I can wait till you pull it.
Okay. All right. Great. All right. Well, moving right along, are there any committee members that wish to pull an item? Okay. Mr. Laurenti.
I'd like to pull item 8, please.
Great. Thank you. Mrs. Drury.
Item 4, please.
Thank you. And Mr. Solomon.
Item 3, please.
Fabulous. Okay. I would welcome a motion to approve items 1 through 9 with the exception of number 3, number 4, and number 8.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Drury and a second by Mr. Laurenti. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right, let's move to number 3, please. All right, we have, we're going to acknowledge the police department application and authorize acceptance, if awarded, of the COPS Office Stop School Violence Grant School Violence Prevention Program. Mr. Solomon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. May I direct a question to our police chief, please?
Absolutely.
Chief, looking through the attachments, you kind of want to give us an overview of what this grant is and this partnership with the school system? And
Sure. The school district approached us and asked for our partnership in applying for this grant. It is a federal grant through the Department of Justice from the COPS office. And basically what it will do is it will allow for improvement, actually an overhaul of the physical security features at Central High School is the proposal. The total project cost would be close to $1 million, of which the grant would cover half of the cost, $500,000. So the requirements of the grant, it required a law enforcement entity to partner with the school district and for the law enforcement entity to apply for the grant. We have an agreement with the school district that if we receive the grant, our finance office will work with their business office and we will do a pass-through of the funds to the school district to manage the project.
they're putting in the $500,000?
Correct.
Okay. So can you talk a little bit about what this program entails? Like what are they actually going to do to help school violence?
Sure. Basically, this is strictly from a crime prevention standpoint, this is called target hardening. Basically, they're going to fortify the physical security features of the school. That'll be including updating access to the school. It's obviously a very large school. There are many ingress and egress opportunities, so that would be secured primarily with technology. Improve lighting, emergency lighting, an overhaul of their video system, which video systems have really come a long way. It will be in excess of 200 cameras, which for a building of that size is appropriate, and a overhaul of their public announcement communication system, which is critical in an emergency. So,
Do will the liaison officers receive training on all of these systems, or is that strictly going to stay with the school?
We partner with each school. Each school has a different physical security and electronic surveillance system throughout the district. So each school liaison officer is familiar with what is going on at their assigned school and works in collaboration with the school administrator at those schools. So we'll partner with them on that.
So assuming we receive this grant, when can we expect to see some of these features take place?
You know, this grant came with a short timeline. It appears that the Department of Justice anticipates announcing awards very soon. And so I would say during the school year, but that's going to be the school's maintenance staff, I believe, will coordinate it, and so the city won't have a part of the timeline, but I would anticipate through this school year, improvements would start to be made.
Thank you. Thank you for answering the questions. You know, one of the things I think we can do as a city, and this is really proof of it, that the city and the school district can actually partner together. And we have these opportunities like we've done with Rapid Ride, and to do this, obviously working through you all, we have the liaison program, and I think that's been very helpful. And I think when these government entities work together, especially for the safety and security of our children and the teachers and staff, it's a win-win for everybody. And so wholeheartedly support, obviously, doing this, but I think it's a good opportunity to talk about that partnership that we have. It's something we take for granted, but today's the first day of school, and we know that security and safety of our children is paramount. I know for me, just thinking about my child who goes to Central, so this is, certainly hits close to home, but hopefully this program will work so well that maybe we can institute that in other schools, and I'm sure that's one thing we'll take a look at. So, yeah, good things. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments and questions, Mr. Solomon, and Chief, thank you for this opportunity. All right, so we have a motion to acknowledge. All in favor? Or we just? Oh,
Motion to acknowledge.
second. Okay, we've got a motion to acknowledge by, I just lost track. Mr. Laurenti, and second by Mr. Solomon. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, moving along to item number 4, we're going to authorize staff to apply and accept, if awarded, the Fire Adaptive Communities Learning Network grant in the amount of $8,626. Ms. Drury, you have the floor.
I move to approve, and then I'd like to retain the floor.
Second.
Okay, a motion to approve by Mrs. Drury, second by Mr. Laurenti. Go ahead.
May I ask Chief Seals a question, please?
Absolutely.
Chief, could you just touch briefly on this? I know this isn't quite as big as the police department's grant, but yet it is vital because it deals towards wildland mitigation. Could you just touch briefly on it, please?
Sure. This is a reimbursable grant for travel, training, and personnel cost to send some of our newer members to go to communities that have survivable space initiatives like we do, but to learn new trends and new projects to bring, and then they can bring that back to Rapid City and implement those here. We often talk about succession planning in the fire service, and this is an opportunity to where we can send our folks to partner with and go to the workshops and the trainings of communities that are doing it right, much like what I feel Rapid City is doing, but to keep freshening up those ideas and learn new things. So.
Okay, thank you very much. I yield.
Great. Thank you for your questions, and thank you for your comments, Chief. Is there a motion? Oh, that's right. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right, moving right along to item number 8. Under Community Development, approve Investment Committee's recommendation to Council to cancel Community Development Block Grant, the CDBG funding, for fiscal year 2015 in the amount of $120,721.56, and fiscal year 2017 for $75,000, awarded to Freeland Ranch Hague for non-performance, and call the irrevocable letter of credit due for the fiscal year of 2015 funds. Oh, yeah. Mr. Haig, please, you have the floor.
Good afternoon. Thank you for permitting me the opportunity to speak. My name is Kent Haig, president of Freeland Ranch LLC. I would like to ask for a 30-day continuance on the matter, and I can give you a brief synopsis why. No one more than our group has wanted to see this thing proceed expeditiously. There have been a number of factors that have slowed it, and that I think directly tie to working with the city in certain ways and so forth. But we also wanted to have the opportunity to let you know that there's been some real progress made also, and that we've done the progress reports and so forth, but in the last 3 to 4 months we've been able to make some fundamental decisions and been able to identify additional manpower to put on it from an executive level. My partner, John Gomez, will become very active in this now, which should really help move things along as well. But we've also identified a much more accessible piece of property that's part of the property, but it's a piece that is right on Mall Drive with utilities running along in front of it. It's much more achievable and financially and economical to get utilities tied into what I'm referring to as kind of a beta site. And I refer to it as a beta site because we probably narrowed it down to 3 or 4 particular types of structures that can help us achieve economic feasibility to keep the cost down, to truly make it an affordable housing, either by leasing it or by by selling it. But there are a number of plans in the hatching, and we'd like to have an opportunity to provide those facts, and we'd like to ask that this particular issue, until those facts are made known and provided to you, be deferred for 30 days, 2 meetings.
Okay, thank you for your comments. I'm going to open this up to any questions from any members of the committee. Ms. Drury, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for coming today. Kent, I guess I have one question for you, and then I would like to ask Barb Garcia a question, if I would. What is exactly going to happen in the 30-day extension?
There's a number of things. One is that we believe, and even in the past week, we have reason to believe that the certification of the largest piece of tax increment District 70 will be approved and finalized, so that it will be a clear indicator to us that there will be accessible funds. We can have all the greatest plans in the world, but if you can't get funding for it, whether it's through a TIF or otherwise, you really don't have the wind in your sails. But we think we've made some pretty good progress on that recently to get at least 3.2 of the 4.2 finalized and approved, and then continue to work on the rest. So we'll be continuing our efforts with the city on that. The other thing is that we have also do have Whiston Associates that had participated in the original and ongoing drawings and renditions of a parcel, or of how the layout would look in mass of the whole 128 acres. Now, quite frankly, one area that didn't get any attention because it was only an acre or so is the piece that we think would be the best for starting something to fulfill the grant requirements. Because moving a ski boat's a lot easier than moving the Titanic, or bad example, but maybe moving an ocean liner. Yeah, we want to be the ocean liner up there too, but right now we think we have a much more agile plan to meet the criteria for the CDBG grants to keep the city in compliance and to keep us in compliance. Now, as far as the $75,000 grant, in June we did provide the letter of credit for that. So that is in place, so there's protection there. and as well as Bank West is in the process of renewing the letter of credit for the one that's been distributed already, the $120,000, and that letter of credit currently is still, I think it's good through February, so we're not pressing any timelines that way either. But we think that there's a number of things that are really hatching right now that 30 days would be of great advantage to everybody, because we're going to see a lot more cards in that time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hague. Ms. Garcia, would you be able to come up to the lectern? I have a couple things I need to kind of clarify in my mind, if you don't mind. I know a lot of times when you're working on these grants and redistribution of grants, things like that, there are timelines. And obviously, through one of these, we're already well into it. Could you clarify some of those dates and what needs to happen?
Yes. The original funds, the $120,000, are 2015 funds. They must be totally completed no later than July of 2020. And that means structure built, people occupying it who are low income. That's the completion of the deal. So we're about 2 years from that final deadline. Should that project not be moving forward, for us to reallocate the funds to another viable project that can be completed by that time, I need a minimum of 1 year, because it takes us 4 months just to reallocate the funds following our processes. One other deadline that has come up is that it's been over a year since the drawing of the funds, and there's been no progress. And what that triggers in the HUD system is a remediation report. And I have to submit to HUD by September 28th, a remediation plan showing how we are going to have this project completed. We sent Mr. Hague some milestones that would show that it was going to be proceeding. I haven't received the signed copy back. He did say that he wanted to make some changes to that, but I haven't received the changes. I'm going to have that before September 28th to submit to HUD. From then on, every month we must do a report to HUD showing our progress meeting those milestones. So that, I looked in the HUD system and we're flagged that that's the final date I have to submit that report. So those are kind of the strict timelines that I'm under. Should we not spend our money and have occupied housing or some other eligible activity completed by July of 2020, the city will lose that $120,000, and if we also grant the $75,000, and we will then lose that total amount annually from there on. If we don't use our funds and have them occupied, HUD takes it away from the city totally. So my concern is within a year out, at least, I have to reallocate to something that can get it spent. I recommend that if he's not ready to go now, it is better for us to pull money back and allow him to apply for the 2019 money, which starts a new 5-year ticking that may work better with the project if it's not ready to move forward. So that's another option, is that we pull it back and then reallocate funds in the next go-round. And that application's October 1, and the funds would be released in summer of or fall of next year. So
there's nothing right now preventing Mr. Hague from applying again, but really you're on a 1-year deadline, correct? Because
well, we're at 2 years out, but within 1 year, that, yeah. But we have to have a plan, and we have to be making progress, or HUD will tell us we'd better pull the money back. So,
and then we lose that money for perpetuity.
If we don't get it reallocated, spent, and completed, yes.
Okay, I'm going to yield, and maybe there's other folks in the queue.
Thank you for your comments and questions. Mr. Solomon, you're up.
Thank you. So Barb, can you kind of talk to us about the timeline leading up to this recommendation from the committee? Has he been given ample opportunity to provide successful completion of those milestones, and then kind of what, inevitably, what did the committee decide that was the tipping point for them to bring this call to action to us?
On May 25th of this year, again, it's been one full year as of June since all of the funds were drawn down. So in June of 2017, he drew the final amount of the 120. And in that whole time frame, there's been no actual progress towards getting some buildings built. Now, as far as I understand, no permits have been pulled, no ground's been moved, no plans have been accepted through the planning department, or funding identified. And so that's a concern for getting a project, a housing project. It typically takes a couple of years to do. The milestones letter, since it'd been one full year by June of 17, we followed up after talking to him in May. He was in the process of getting the line of credit for the $75,000. And he did get that in June. In June, we sent him a letter about the milestones for the agreement, and that we also needed the extension on the $120,000 to cover the full period of development, since it's not being completed yet. When he originally applied, he thought the project would be done by 2019. So we need that extended, and we held up the contract for the $75,000 based on that is needed. Since it's our largest sum of money, we definitely want that to be protected to the end of the time frame. And Kent did call me in June, the day after he got that letter, and said that he did want to make some modifications to our milestones, and I said, that's fine, but I haven't received them yet. So that's been another couple of months. So the timeline is going, and when we met at the end of July, that's when, for deciding about funding for 2018 with the investment committee, that's when they asked about that progress, and seeing none, they felt that it was in the city's best interest to call it back and encourage them to apply at a future date.
Okay. And Mr. Haig, you made a reference that one of the delays for you has been dealing with the city. Can you be more specific on what that is?
Yeah, yes, specifically, the level of frustration and delay that we've experienced with the approval of TIF 70 project costs. It would seem completely unrelated, but it's totally related. And the reason being is that with having $4.2 million of project costs that have been submitted 2.5 years ago and have been under review since then, going months at a time without progress, things being lost on at least 2 occasions, 500,000 here, several hundred thousand there, and not by us. Our submittals, KTM Engineering has provided those in a very organized fashion. I'm not here to throw rocks at anybody. I want to keep the relationship very positive, but for instance, my brother Rex has actually gotten out of the whole Freeland Ranch land and everything simply because of his frustration level. He won't do anything more with the city. I'm not that. I'm not in that way. John Gomez and I and my brother Brian are very committed to this. John Gomez is also one of the other owners of the parcel. That has caused, that delay in certification takes up $4.2 million of our borrowing power with our lender. And external and internal regulations, every lender has them. You're constantly bumping up that lending limit because we do a number of things, in this case with Bank West. And Bank West is, I think, the area's leader in tax increment financing loans as well. So whether we borrowed it under just the name of the project, our own personal project capacity, or whether we borrowed it, which you still have to borrow it personally, for a TIF project with a repayment mechanism, that's not possible. We just, there's not the room to do that. So that was and it continues to be, but like I say, I think we're making pretty good progress on that now to loosen some of that up. So it gives us an opportunity to at least identify a funding source. And the other thing I think was in having well, probably even probably over, well, it's been over a year or two ago, just indicators of a tax increment finance policy that was starting to point towards making it harder for developers, whether it's affordable housing or not. And I think affordable housing hopefully is being kept on the front burner. But making the TIF policy is making it actually harder to get a tax increment district. So those are the I guess the omnibus, if you will, indicators that just did not show friendly skies ahead for a project like this. Now, with all that said, we have gone forward to do a project that will comply and keep the city in compliance with the standards that are set under these CDBG grants. Again, one for $75,000, one for $120,000. Based on my discussions with Barb, that would be somewhere between 7 to 10 homes, or 5 to 10 homes. At least. So, in order to make sure we fulfill that and reach these dates, which 2 years would be very obtainable for a significantly scaled down immediate project to provide that shelter, provide those affordable homes to be in compliance. We anticipate and have identified the piece of land, like I mentioned earlier, that is close. It's right on Mall Drive. It's very close to hook up to sewer. Water is in the vicinity. It may have to be brought a little ways, but it's a little over an acre of land that can easily accommodate the footprint of the type of structures we're thinking, ones that are going to be durable, look good, secure, and properly sized to keep that level of economic efficiency so they can be maintained in the long run, whether it's through rents or by sales, so that parties have, the owners, the ultimate owners, have an ability to maintain those affordable level of payments. So by bringing it down and doing a project, it's frankly, it's given us an opportunity, or it's forced us to say, okay, how can we maximize and still have a very nice product and a very nice place to live? How can we maximize this acre of land to the most efficient housing possible and keep it at a price point? And we've narrowed it down to 3 or 4 concepts that we think will be able to meet the mark quite nicely and fulfill the CDBG terms while we're not abandoning the whole big Freeland Ranch concept. The small one we can do without having to worry about necessarily getting a TIF passed before we can even move, which is always the key to making the big picture, the big development go. That's one of the keys, that along with federal and state funding, South Dakota Housing Authority, you name it. And frankly, we kind of felt that we've been out of, I don't want to get negative on anything, but the bottom line is we have every intention to conform to the requirements of the CDBG grant to keep the city out of harm's way when it comes to that. And we will also put, and have put, the $75,000 line of credit in place, and it's an irrevocable line of credit. Bank West is working on the other one, like I mentioned before, for $120. And we're able to proceed rather expediently. There are plans since in the last 3 months that have also indicated the feasibility of creating the access into the main area in the fashion and in the design that it was already been developed. So while this small project is going on, with the big one, we're not abandoning it. It's still proceeding, but of course it plods forward.
Thank you, Mr. Hague. Madam Chair, would you permit me to ask the Community Development Director a question?
Go ahead.
I guess I think, Mr. Young, need an opportunity for you to respond. You know, one of the claims he made was really the length of time it's taken for us to work through this TIF. Can you shed some light on that for us?
Sure. May I just first say that there may be extenuating circumstances, including the TIF, that are affecting Mr. Hague's situation. However, that is not necessarily directly tied into the item that we're discussing here today. There are a lot of complicated details that are not we're not prepared to discuss at this moment that have gone into the review and certification of the TID number 70, which is coming to a finality here. But I might just mention that there have been a lot of situations and complications and frustrations on behalf of the city in not receiving all of the detailed information required for the completion of the certification of that project. Now, I know Mr. Hague may not necessarily agree with that assessment, but that is our assessment, that there have been a lot of incomplete, detailed information that the city has waited on over a period of time in different requests that have slowed that process down.
So this is not a situation where the city's just let this collect dust and not work on it?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Just to let you know where I'm at, Mr. Hague, and we have others in the queue that have opportunity to respond.
And Councilman, I'd really insist on responding to that at the appropriate time, like now, if that's okay.
Chair allows, that's fine.
The extenuating circumstances that, if Kyle from KTM Engineering were here, he would also echo this clearly. Our records and our receipts and so forth have been provided in bound, very clearly marked order in binders provided over. They were submitted approximately 2.5 years ago, and in April of 2017, after not seeing any movement for 4 or 5 months, we started bringing it to the light of asking Patsy to make some progress. Fine, we made some progress for a bit, and then it went a period of time. Then I think in December of 17, we met with Mr. Young shortly after he arrived here, and he agreed that over a year was way too long for anything like this to have to happen. Since that time, we found out, we received an email that was circulated, I think, to the City Council. We received an email that that Patsy stated she had not received information, and this was on mid-April. She had not received information that was requested in January, when in fact she had received it, had acknowledged receipt of that exact material, but did not recall receiving it, misplaced it, whatever happened. But it was verified that in fact we did send it, and it was there, and it was lost. Most recently, on July 31st, we, after making some progress at a meeting with Mr. Young and the city attorney's office and a couple of folks from engineering, we had a sit-down meeting, and at least we felt we were making progress because there were $3.2 million that Patsy was completely thumbs up with, and we said, great, if we can get that certified and then work on what procedures need to be worked on for that other amount that was not yet allowed, that would be a huge help to us, because that loosens up $3.2 million of our bank borrowing ability. A day later, we were notified that, well, time out, if you certify that now, we won't let you get the other unapproved amounts dealt with or approved or whatever. It's a one-trick pony. It's done if you do it now. Well, that was inconsistent, number one, with the law. It's inconsistent with a number of things. But since then, they've reversed that position, which is great, and I appreciate that. And I didn't want this to even get this drawn out here, but I can't let comments like that just be made without response. On July 31st, we did find out, I sat down with my banker, went through all their records and what Patsy had, and it appeared that Patsy's records were missing about almost $500,000 of receipts and invoices and things that had been submitted. So I immediately called KTM and I said, can you verify that this was in fact submitted? He looks through, and that evening he found every one, in fact, had been submitted, nearly $500,000 worth of submittals. They had been submitted. For some reason, were not appearing on her a chart as submitted costs. They didn't exist in her chart. So we brought that to her attention, and that evening, Kyle got the replacement submittals to the one she lost to her. I talked with her about a week after that, and she said it'd be about 2 weeks before she could get to look at it. And I get it. Okay, that's fine. We waited this long, why not? So it's my understanding that by the end of this week, she'll have had reviewed the new additional $500,000 worth of submittals that, not new, but the ones that she had lost and we've now replaced. So anytime has been a request, we've gotten on it and obtained as much as we could. Now, the magnitude of what is being asked for, and I should say the minutia, the lack of magnitude is what's quite frustrating here. There'll be and I wish you brought it with me, but there is for instance, several examples of very, very small amounts of huge invoices, several $100,000s of invoices being submitted, and things like a copy country receipt for $1.62 out of many, many hundreds of thousands of dollars was one of the issues. So,
Mr. Hague,
things like that.
I think, it sounds to me like this is the bigger discussion on the TIF, which is not the item here.
Right.
But clearly, I hope some of this stuff is worked out before it's brought to the council on the TIF. So I think for us, we're going to have to redirect this, and I understand your frustration, and I can tell there's some challenges between the two groups, and I know that'll come before us later on. But on this issue, just so you know where I'm at, I don't want to risk losing these funds for this or future projects. And so where I'm leaning is that we would go ahead and pull this and give you and anybody else the option to reapply, just so that we can stay in compliance and not risk it, because we've already delayed this long. We don't have much time, and that's what concerns me. Is I don't want to mess around with something that we may never get back, especially when I know the Fed's always looking at where to pull those funds away from. We need every cent that we can get in Rapid City, South Dakota. So that's my thing, is I have to look at I care about the city at large. And your project, I think, is a very worthwhile project, which is why it got a lot of support. And I hope that you are still successful, and I would still encourage you to reapply and go through all of that. But that's where I'm leaning right now, just on this $75,000. On the TIF issue, I think there's some bigger issues here, communication challenges especially. That's an entirely different thing, although it's related. But on this issue, and I need to let other council members chime in, but I just want to kind of say that's where I'm leaning at on this, just because I don't want to risk losing it. And, and too many balls in the air for us to really take a lot of chances, and we've given quite a bit of time already. So with that, I'm going to yield to these other council members, see if they have any more comments. Thank you.
We had some people in the queue. They backed out last time. All right. Mr. Laurenti, you have the floor.
Thank you, Council. Barb, could you approach the podium, please? Barb, were you aware of at all that the responses that you were getting from the applicant for the CDBG funds was being held up because he was working with the city on his TIF? Were you aware of that was part of the problem apparently with the communication with your office?
Right from the start, he was very open that he was going to apply for a TIF, so I knew he was applying. He didn't specifically say that holding these parts up were towards that. I assumed they were, in part at least, but returning milestones and some of the other things I didn't think were necessarily related. I mean, they're related in that he has to have financing to go forward, that part of it. But as far as getting plans in and some permits, or even looking at that, I understand the financing. I know he was also looking to apply to South Dakota Housing, and those grants are like a year to achieve. You have to apply, and like mine, it takes about a year before you actually have funding released. But he hadn't really given me any feedback on where he was with financing in particular. So. Okay,
thank you very much. And I want to echo Alderman Solomon's comments in that I think we need to follow the investment committee's recommendation, given the fact that the applicant can apply for these funds as well. So it's not that these funds are not available for this project. There's just another application process that's going to need to happen. But the reality is that we need to protect these funds, not only for these awarded years that we have involved, but for future, as you stated. That's our job from the city's standpoint, is to protect those grant funds that can be used to help stimulate these kinds of affordable housing projects. And so I think that would be the most cautious and best and prudent move to make for city government. Again, the applicant would have the opportunity to secure those funds for the very same project. I yield.
All right, I'd like to add a little input here. Obviously, we know that there are very rare opportunities where things are very black and white or very concrete. What I'm concerned about is the lack of communication, apparent or otherwise, and the response to requests that we did not get. I'm kind of leaning towards Mr. Hague would like a 30-day extension. We have some people that do not want to do that. I want to direct a question to Ms. Sumption. Would there be any harm in find a compromise and have a 2-week extension on this to give Mr. Hague a opportunity to provide some milestones and pull permits and do what he needs to do to show good faith as some sort of compromise? I mean, we have 3 years invested. I don't see a couple 2 weeks.
From my perspective, the only thing that we would have to be, and Barb would be the better one to ask the question to, but
Okay.
from my perspective, the issue, because I believe part of it is talking about calling on the letter of credit, is when that expires. Because if that were to expire in that period that you extend it, then we wouldn't be held without any repercussion if it was not paid back to us, type of thing.
February sticking in my mind, is that what you were referring to?
Yes, yeah, it expires in February. And 2 weeks, actually, we would appreciate that, because I think we can demonstrate not only what we've been doing, but demonstrate some movement that we're very close to being able to make these submittals that actually have some substance to them. But I'd agree to 2 weeks if that would kind of be a middle ground, because I think we can demonstrate a lot in this time. The second thing that I take slight exception to is that in order to get all the planning, testing, studies, engineering, and so forth for the big area, that's been significant amounts of money been spent on getting that going, and that's where the bulk of the 120,000 went. For the big area. So I don't want to see not only that now becoming essentially useless until we're ready to use it in maybe 2 or 3 years, because the grant application, I respect that, we do plan on that, Barb, but the grant application also takes some amount of time, as you all pointed out. But to create the burden on the project financially with the 120,000 being called, when we have 2 years to comply with it yet, I think in 2 weeks we can demonstrate with some level of comfort to the City Council that we can do this.
Okay, so before we exhaust this issue, can I just have Ms. Garcia come and give a few more statements on this? Harm in waiting 2 more weeks?
No, there wouldn't be a problem in 2 weeks. The only problem with 30 days, which you could do, is that he would have to provide me with milestones, because I have to submit to HUD a remediation plan no later than the 28th of September. So that would fall within that, before the 30 days. And then we would have to start reporting on that.
Okay. Thank you very much for your insight, your input, and your involvement, Mr. Hague as well. All right, so I would appreciate a modified motion.
I'm
Right?
in the queue.
Mr. Solomon, you're up.
So what I'd like to do is make a motion to grant a 2-week extension. I was in the middle of my motion. The one thing I would also ask is after that 2 weeks, we would request that Barb Garcia would put this back on the agenda so that we are forced to deal with it, that it not be forgotten about or anything like that. So we'll give the 2-week extension to you, Mr. Hague. Only fair, obviously, we want communication issues to work out, but after that 2 weeks, it will come from her office to come back on the agenda, at which time I would support the committee's recommendation at that time, unless we see some significant progress and everything. And Barb, basically, if Barb recommends it, is what I'm going to go with. So I encourage you to work really closely with her office and be in constant touch. If she recommends it, thumbs up by me. If not,
Okay, so for clarification, we have until September 12th, the next legal and finance meeting. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, a second by Mr. Laurenti. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you very much. All right, moving right along. Thank you, everybody. To item 10 under Parks and Recreation. We have an introduction, first reading of ordinance number 6276, an ordinance to amend sections of the Rapid City Municipal Code relating to infested trees and storage of wood. Any comments, questions?
Madam Chair, you said item number 10?
Did I? Oh, no,
No, it's item 10. Just want to make sure that we officially have the public comment period open and closed
yeah,
before we
I'm
deal with the item.
All right, we're going to backtrack, sorry. All right, okay. With the items approved, let's move to our non-consent items, open it up to public comment. I'll get it right one of these days. Anyone in the audience? Okay, thank you. Public comment is closed. Now we're back to number 10. Introduction and first reading of ordinance number 6276, an ordinance to amend sections of the Rapid City Municipal Code relating to infested trees and storage of wood. Mr. Solomon.
Thank you. And may I direct a question to Andy Bernard, as he
Absolutely.
is here in the audience with us today. Andy, hello?
How's it going?
So can you kind of give us an overview of what's bringing this forward? And I know that we have some pressing issues that may be making this more urgent for us to deal with.
Sure. We're just trying to get our ducks in a row for the inevitable arrival of emerald ash borer. What this does, it just kind of cleans up our wording. We removed the mountain pine beetle portion of that and took that language to still include mountain pine beetle, but it makes it a little more general that we can use that in the existing ordinance. And then we cleaned up the last part of that, 1232, 120. That basically just was elm wood. We want to be able to incorporate more wood besides elm, including ash. Not currently, but once EAB shows up. Really didn't remove a whole lot of language. We just kind of moved it around and then added a little bit more so we can incorporate.
So you say you kind of generalized the language a little bit more?
We did, and once something would be declared a public nuisance, it would be covered under ordinance.
So that, I think if there's any controversy in this, I hate to use that word, is that would we use this more generalized language in order to just take down trees we don't like? Even though we don't know necessarily, if it's infested or not. I think that's, if there's any pushback, it would be that.
I do not believe that would be possible with the ordinance. No.
Okay.
You can't do that now, and you would not be able to do that after this is adopted.
So it's really if it is a harm to the public good, such as this emerald ash that or before that, the pine beetle, that spread, we want to prevent that spread from happening throughout the entire community. That's really what we're talking about. We're not talking about the city just wanting to go take down trees on people's properties.
No, the language that's already in here has been in here.
Yep.
So very little addition to it, just to include the language we needed to include emerald ash borer and maintain including mountain pine beetle or any other future insect or disease.
Any other
problem.
pest.
Yes.
And thus creating disease. And I think that's the only thing I want to make sure that we're perfectly clear on as we discuss this item. So, thank you. I yield.
Great. Entertain a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, motion to approve by Mrs. Drury, second by Mr. Laurenti. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Okay, moving along to number 11, our introduction and first reading of ordinance number 6281, an ordinance regarding fiscal year 2019 appropriation ordinance. Mrs. Drury, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. May I direct a question to our Chief Finance Officer, Pauline Sumption?
Absolutely.
Could you just run through and give us a synopsis of what this is about, Ms. Sumption?
You bet. This is the first ordinance reading, or the first reading of the ordinance, basically to set the 2019 budget. We had the budget meeting last night. Obviously, the changes that were discussed last night on that $203,000 have not been included. So this is based primarily on the mayor's presentation that he gave. As I indicated in agenda review, there were some minor differences that when we actually got it put into the system that we noticed, and had we been able to do that prior to it coming to his presentation, that it would have been caught prior to that. So they're minimal in nature. The revenues do match their expenses. The CPI is included in there. But again, that will be changed for second reading based off of, not the CPI portion, but the building permit portion, and the cuts will be brought forward for the second reading.
Okay, and this is just a legality that we need to go through every year, correct?
Yep, every year we have to do this. We'll do second reading, and then this is so I can put in our tax levy request to the county by October 1.
Okay, thank you very much. I yield.
Okay. All right, looking for a motion to approve. Motion by Mr. Solomon, second by Mr. Laurenti. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Move to adjourn.
Wait. Due to the Labor Day holiday, we have a city council meeting on Tuesday, September 4th, where all these items will be forwarded. I welcome the public to attend. You're on. Second. Motion to adjourn by Mr. Laurenti, second by Ms. Drury. Thank you.